The scream came just as the morning bell rang. Panic hit the schoolyard when a wild bobcat appeared. Kids screamed. Traps were set. But one girl didn't run, she stared from the window, frozen. She knew that bobcat. She had raised him. And now, she had to choose, stay silent, or risk everything to save him. It was the first chilly Monday of October, and the air was sharp with the smell of falling leaves. Maple Ridge Elementary looked peaceful that morning. Birds chirped from the tall maples that framed the schoolyard. The grass was still wet with dew, and the wind gently tossed around papers that had fallen from a student's backpack. Everything seemed normal, until the scream shattered the calm. Ella Thomas had just stepped off the school bus, hugging her science project to her chest. She saw the group of kids gathered near the fence beside the jungle gym, their eyes wide, their voices high and panicked. "Don't go near it," someone shouted. "There's a monster," cried a second grader. Ella rushed forward with a few others, confused. But when she saw what everyone was staring at, her breath caught in her throat. There, only 20 feet from the playground, a sleek, golden-furred bobcat stood at the edge of the trees. It wasn't attacking. It wasn't growling. It just watched silently, tail flicking once, ears perked, body calm. Before anyone could react, a teacher blew a whistle and started shouting, "Inside! Everyone, go inside now!" Ella was pushed along with the others. Kids were crying. One boy claimed he saw its teeth and swore it was bigger than a lion. Teachers were trying to keep everyone calm, but their eyes were worried too. From her classroom window, Ella kept glancing outside. The bobcat was gone now, vanished into the trees like a shadow. But Ella knew something the others didn't. She knew that bobcat. She had named him Shadow. It had all started 2 months ago, on a quiet summer evening behind Ella's house. While playing near the woods that bordered her backyard, Ella had heard a soft cry, like a baby animal calling for help. She followed the sound and found a tiny, shivering bobcat cub caught under a fallen branch. Its back leg was scraped, and it looked thin, hungry, and scared. Ella didn't scream or run. She slowly knelt down, spoke gently, and used a stick to lift the branch away. The cub didn't attack. It just stared at her with wide golden eyes. She ran back home, snuck into the kitchen, and brought back a small bowl of milk and leftover chicken. The cub ate it all, and then curled up beside a log as if he finally felt safe. Ella started visiting him every evening. She never told anyone, not her parents, not her little brother, not her best friend. It became their secret. She brought him food, water, and even an old blanket her dad was going to throw away. She watched him grow stronger, healthier, braver. She named him Shadow, because he was always quiet and quick and melted into the woods when she left. By the time school started, Shadow was gone. At first, Ella thought he'd left forever. But now she knew he hadn't. Back in the classroom, the principal made an announcement over the loudspeaker. "Good morning, students. Due to an animal sighting on the schoolyard, we'll be keeping all recesses indoors for now. Animal control has been contacted, and safety is our top priority." Whispers filled the room. Some kids looked scared. Others looked excited, especially the ones who had barely seen the bobcat and were already turning the story into a wild adventure. But Ella felt only one thing, worry. Not for herself. For Shadow. That night, at the dinner table, her dad mentioned the bobcat too. Can you believe that? A wild cat showing up right by the school. They better catch it fast. Could be dangerous. Ella looked down at her plate, pushing around her food. It probably wasn't trying to hurt anyone, she mumbled. Her mom raised an eyebrow. Still, it doesn't belong near kids. Ella didn't argue. But her heart was heavy. After everyone had gone to bed, she crept out of her room, careful not to make the floorboards creak. She opened her closet and pulled out a drawstring bag she had packed months ago, just in case she ever saw Shadow again. Inside was the old blanket, a flashlight, and a Tupperware full of cold chicken. She stared at the bag, biting her lip. She didn't want him to get caught. But what could she do? The next day, the schoolyard was quieter than usual. No one went near the tree line. The recess bell rang, but the students only stayed inside, watching movies or coloring on their desks. 2 animal control officers came that afternoon. They drove in a white truck and set up 2 large metal traps along the fence. Ella's chest tightened when she saw them. The traps were baited with raw meat and had doors that would snap shut if anything stepped inside. That evening, as Ella walked home, she stopped by the school fence. The traps gleamed in the fading sunlight. She looked toward the trees, hoping to see Shadow. Nothing. She hurried home and sat on her bed, hugging her knees. "Don't go near those traps, please," she whispered into the air, as if he could hear her. She didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, one of the traps was sprung, but empty. A few tufts of golden fur clung to the inside bars, and the meat was gone. The animal control officers scratched their heads. "Smart one," one said. "Knows how to eat without getting caught." But Ella's heart sank. Shadow had been here. He was still close. And he was getting braver. That night, Ella made a decision. She waited until her parents were watching TV, then slipped out the back door with her bag. She ran quietly through the neighborhood, sneakers crunching softly on fallen leaves. The wind was cold, and her heart beat faster with every step. When she reached the school, the yard was empty and quiet. The traps were still there, silver in the moonlight. She didn't go near them. Instead, she turned and headed for the woods. "Shadow," she called softly, walking past the first row of trees. "It's me." She heard a rustle. A branch snapped. And then, he appeared. Bigger than before. Healthier. Stronger. But his golden eyes were the same. He stepped forward slowly, ears up, tail swishing. Ella dropped to her knees and opened her bag. "I brought you food. Please, you can't stay near the school. They're going to trap you. Or worse." He looked at her for a long moment, then patted closer. He sniffed the food, nuzzled the blanket, and sat beside her. They stayed there together in the dark, girl and Bobcat, quiet, calm, understanding one another in a way no one else could. "I'll help you," she whispered. "I'll find you a safe place." And in her heart, she knew she had to act fast. Because time was running out. The next morning felt heavier. Ella walked into class with dark circles under her eyes. She hadn't slept much after her secret meeting with Shadow in the woods. Her heart was full, but her mind was racing. She had fed him. Talked to him. Touched his fur. He had trusted her. But that trust came with a burden. The Bobcat was still near the school, and danger was getting closer every day. At recess, students crowded around the classroom windows again, staring at the traps outside. "Did they catch it yet?" asked a boy in Ella's class. "No, but I heard they're bringing in more people if it shows up again," someone replied. "Why don't they just shoot it?" another kid whispered. Ella flinched. "No one needs to shoot anything," she said louder than she meant to. Everyone turned. Her face turned red. She looked down quickly and stayed silent. But inside, a storm was brewing. That night, Ella couldn't stop thinking. Shadow wasn't just some random wild animal. He had grown up around humans because of her. She had helped him survive. She had fed him. He had trusted her first, and now he was too close to people, because of her actions. Now it was her responsibility to protect him. Not with wishes. With a plan. She grabbed her notebook and sat at her desk. The wind rattled her window. Outside, the trees swayed in the dark. She turned to a blank page and wrote in big letters. How to save Shadow. Step 1, get him away from the school. Step 2, lead him deeper into the woods. Step 3, make sure he has food and shelter. Step 4, come back sometimes, but only if it's safe. She took a deep breath. Tomorrow, she would sneak back to the woods. Not just to visit, but to guide him far away. The next day passed slowly. Ella barely heard her teacher during math. She jumped when someone slammed a book near her. She scribbled answers on her worksheet without reading the questions. All she could think about was nightfall. When the final bell rang, she rushed home, stuffed her bag with food again, and waited. The moment her parents went to bed, she slipped out the back door. The moon was high and bright. The schoolyard glowed silver. She passed the silent traps and headed into the forest. This time, she didn't have to call. Shadow appeared within minutes. He stood tall now, no longer the weak cub she once found. His muscles moved under his fur like liquid. His eyes gleamed. But he still made no sound. Ella knelt and opened her bag again. Okay, she whispered. Follow me. They walked for nearly an hour. Through the tall trees. Over rocks and shallow streams. Past the edge of the forest trail. Deeper than she had ever gone before. Shadow followed, always a few feet behind, quiet and steady. Finally, they reached a small clearing surrounded by trees on all sides. A dry log lay across one end, and there was a thick patch of tall grass in the center. This is it, Ella said softly. No people. No buildings. Just peace. She laid the blanket near the log. Placed the food beside it. Then sat down and looked up at the stars. Shadow came close and laid beside her, like he used to. They stayed that way for a while. No words. No movement. Just understanding. Ella whispered, you have to stay here now. Please don't go near the school again. Promise me. The bobcat blinked slowly. Then stood and walked to the tall grass. He disappeared into it without a sound. Ella stared for a moment. Her chest ached. Her eyes stung. She got up, wiped her cheeks, and made her way home. She didn't look back. The next morning, things were different. The traps were still untouched. The school buzzed with normal chatter. The bobcat hadn't returned. Animal control packed up their gear and left around noon. Ella sat on the playground steps, staring toward the trees. He was safe now. She had done the right thing. Still, she missed him already. Weeks passed. The weather got colder. Leaves turned gold and orange. Halloween decorations appeared in the classroom windows. No more bobcat sightings. No more fear. No more traps. But for Ella, things had changed forever. She stopped rushing to recess. She stayed quiet during lunch. She spent her free time reading about wild cats, forests, and animal tracking. And every weekend, just after sunrise, she returned to the clearing. She brought food. Sometimes, she'd spot paw prints near the log. Once, the blanket had been moved. But she never saw Shadow. Until one day, just as she turned to leave the clearing, she heard a rustle. She froze. Then slowly turned her head. And there he was. Standing just at the edge of the trees, watching her. He didn't move forward. He didn't come close. He just watched. And then, vanished again. But that was enough. Ella smiled through her tears. He was alive. He was safe. And he remembered. Fall deepened into November, and frost began to form on the windows of Maple Ridge Elementary. Kids talked more about the coming winter break than wild animals now. The Bobcat incident had faded into memory. But for Ella, it never left. Every Saturday morning, just after dawn, she hiked quietly to the secret clearing with food packed in her backpack. She left chicken or rabbit meat near the log and fresh water in a bowl she had hidden beneath a pile of leaves. Sometimes she found the food gone. Sometimes the blanket was disturbed. A few times, she spotted golden fur in the distance. Once, she even saw 2 sets of paw prints. Had Shadow found a friend? But she didn't tell anyone. Not even her best friend, Abby. The secret was too important. Too fragile. Too wild. One Thursday, just before Thanksgiving, Ella's class was asked to write short essays about a moment that changed your life. Most kids wrote about getting a pet, or learning to ride a bike. Ella stared at her paper for a long time. She thought about the summer days she first found Shadow. The days of feeding him, watching him grow. The night she led him through the forest, away from the traps. She wanted to write it all. But she didn't. Instead, she wrote about planting a tree with her dad in the backyard, something that was real, but not too personal. After class, her teacher, Mr. Benson, stopped her. "You've been quiet lately, Ella," he said kindly. "Is everything okay?" She nodded quickly. "Yeah. Just, tired." He looked like he wanted to say more but let her go. She didn't know it then, but someone else had noticed too. That weekend, as usual, Ella made her early morning visit to the clearing. She tiptoed through the leaves, watching her breath rise in soft clouds. She placed food by the log and sat down on a flat rock nearby. The forest was quiet. She waited. Minutes passed. Suddenly, a twig snapped behind her. Her heart leapt. She turned, expecting to see Shadow. But instead, "Ella?" She gasped and scrambled to her feet. It was Abby. Her best friend. Wearing a hoodie and holding her phone in her hand, eyes wide with shock. "What are you doing out here?" Ella asked, voice shaky. "I could ask you the same thing," Abby replied. "I followed you. I knew something was up. You always disappear Saturday mornings." Ella's mouth went dry. You followed me." "I just wanted to know," Abby said. But now, she looked past Ella at the food on the ground. "What is this place?" Ella hesitated. Then she took a deep breath. And told her everything. They sat together on the blanket, the forest still and quiet around them. Ella explained how she had found Shadow as a cub, how she had helped him grow, how he had returned near the school, and how she had led him here to protect him. Abby didn't interrupt. She just listened, mouth slightly open. When Ella finished, she waited for judgment. For anger. For Abby to tell her it was dangerous, foolish, or crazy. But Abby only whispered, "That's the coolest thing I've ever heard." Ella let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "Do you think he'll come?" Abby asked. "I don't know," Ella said. "He's been staying farther away since the weather got colder." They sat in silence a little longer. Then, just as they started packing up, Abby froze and grabbed Ella's arm. "Look. There, at the edge of the clearing, stood Shadow. He was still. Majestic. calm. His fur was thick for winter now, and he looked even stronger than before. He watched them for a long moment. Then, without fear, he took 3 slow steps toward the food, grabbed a piece in his mouth, and padded back into the trees. Abby whispered, "That was amazing." Ella smiled. "Yeah. It always is." But their moment of magic didn't stay secret for long. On Monday, Abby couldn't stop smiling. She dropped hints to classmates, giggled through math, and doodled bobcats on her notebook. Ella warned her again and again, "You can't tell anyone." "I won't," Abby said. "I promise." But secrets are hard for kids to keep, especially magical ones. By Wednesday, a rumor started. Ella's got a pet bobcat in the woods. She tames wild animals. She feeds them meat and rides them like horses. Most of it was nonsense, but the damage was done. During lunch, Mr. Benson pulled Ella aside again. "I heard something strange," he said gently. "About you, and a bobcat?" Ella's stomach dropped. She stared at her shoes. "It's not true," she whispered. But he didn't look convinced. That evening, things got worse. A letter went home to parents about unconfirmed reports of children wandering into the woods alone. Teachers were told to stay alert. The next morning, Ella's dad stormed into her room holding the letter. "Ella, do you know anything about this?" She froze. There was no more hiding. I was just going for walks. That's all." He narrowed his eyes. "Are you feeding wild animals?" She shook her head quickly. "No." He didn't believe her. "No more morning walks. No more sneaking out. I mean it." Ella felt the walls closing in. That weekend, she didn't go to the forest. She sat on her bed, arms wrapped around her knees, staring at the cold gray sky outside. What if Shadow thought she had abandoned him? What if someone else found him, and hurt him? She had protected him from the world. But now, she wasn't sure she could protect him from herself. Then came the storm. That Sunday night, a freezing rain hit the town hard. Trees bent under the wind. Power flickered. Branches cracked. By morning, everything was coated in a layer of ice. Ella stared out her frosted window, heart pounding. What if Shadow had nowhere to go? She grabbed her coat and reached for her bag. Her parents were still asleep. She made it halfway down the stairs when a loud knock hit the door. She froze. Her father opened it, wearing his robe. A park ranger stood on the porch, holding a clipboard and looking serious. "Morning," he said. "We need to ask your daughter a few questions about a wild animal that's been seen near school grounds and private homes. A large bobcat. Some people say she's been feeding it." Ella's breath caught. Her secret wasn't just out. It was under investigation. And Shadow was in danger again. Ella stood frozen on the staircase, her hand gripping the wooden banister, heart racing like thunder. The park ranger stepped into the house, boots dripping water onto the mat. Behind him stood a second man, taller, quieter, holding a tranquilizer rifle in a case. Her dad turned toward her slowly. "Ella," he said, voice low and hard. "Do you have something to tell us?" She couldn't speak. Couldn't lie. Not anymore. I didn't mean to put anyone in danger," she whispered. "He wasn't supposed to come near people. I tried to stop him. I did." "Who is he?" the ranger asked, stepping forward. Ella's voice shook. "His name is Shadow. I found him last summer. He was just a cub, his mom died. I didn't tell anyone. I just helped him." The ranger sighed. That bobcat has been reported near a daycare center. Parents are worried. If it's gotten too comfortable around humans, that's a problem. For everyone, including the animal. Ella's eyes welled with tears. He's not dangerous. He's kind. He just didn't know better. Her dad rubbed his face. Ella, we'll talk about this later. But the ranger wasn't done. Can you take us to where he is? Ella hesitated. If she refused, they'd keep searching. Maybe they'd bring in more people. Drones. Traps. Maybe someone would shoot him on sight. But if she led them, what would they do to him? She looked up. Only if you promise not to hurt him. We'll try to relocate him safely, the ranger said. But we can't leave him here. Tears spilled down her cheeks. This was her fault. And now, she had to fix it. The woods were still coated in a thin crust of ice. Trees shimmered like glass, and leaves cracked underfoot as Ella led the ranger and his assistant toward the clearing. No one spoke. When they arrived, the place looked empty. Silent. The log was dusted with frost. The blanket was stiff from the cold. The food Ella had left 2 weeks ago was untouched. But then, a rustle. From the tree line, Shadow emerged. He was cautious, tense. He stopped when he saw the strangers. Ella stepped forward quickly, raising a hand. It's okay, she whispered. They won't hurt you. I hope. Shadow stayed still. Watching. Waiting. The ranger opened his tranquilizer case. Ella turned fast. Wait. Please, let me talk to him first. The ranger paused. She stepped closer to Shadow, barely breathing. You need to go, she said gently. You can't be here anymore. Not near houses. Not near kids. They'll never understand you like I do. And I don't want you to get hurt. Shadow blinked. Then, slowly, he padded up to her. Ella knelt, tears dripping onto her coat sleeve. You have to be wild now, she whispered. You always were. I just forgot. She buried her face in his fur for one last time. Then stood and stepped back. The ranger raised his arm, slowly, carefully. But Shadow turned. And ran. Fast. Silent. Deep into the woods. The ranger lowered the tranquilizer gun. We won't catch him now, he said softly. He's smarter than most. He'll be okay. Ella nodded, wiping her eyes. Just, let him go. The ranger looked at her, really looked, and nodded. Sometimes, he said, the best way to help something is to let it be free. Weeks passed. Snow came early that year. School closed for 3 days, and holiday decorations filled the hallways. No more bobcat sightings were reported. No more questions were asked. The story died down. But Ella didn't forget. One early spring morning, months later, Ella hiked deep into the woods with her dad. He didn't say much, but he brought a small bag of food and a new blanket. They reached the old clearing. The snow had melted. Grass was poking through the earth again. Birds chirped in the trees. Ella placed the blanket beside the log. Her dad handed her the food. She left it gently on the ground. Then they waited. A few minutes passed. And then, far in the trees, a movement. Golden fur. A flash of sunlight on smooth muscle. Shadow appeared for just a second. He didn't come close. But he paused. Looked at her. And vanished again. That was enough. Ella smiled. She turned to her dad. Can we come again next week? He nodded. Yeah. I think we should. Years later, people still talked about the schoolyard bobcat. Some called it a myth. Some called it a memory. But one girl knew the truth. She knew that the wild isn't something to fear. It's something to understand. To respect. To protect. Because love isn't about holding on. It's about knowing when to let go. And somewhere, deep in those woods, Shadow still watched her. Not too far. Not too close. But just enough. To say, I remember you too.